topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program. Thanks for tuning in again this week. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, joining you live from Dallas, which is home base for me. If you don't know me yet, I'm a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, organizational logotherapist, inspirational speaker, social scientist, and author. I help organizations develop their team into inspirational leaders and create cultures where people actually want to come to work and do their best. I provide programs like the Grab Your Gusto that enable individual team members to discover and unleash their passion and purpose at work to catalyze fulfillment, engagement, and productivity. You can learn more about me and how we can work together at elisecortez.com or gusto-now.com. Let me thank my partner and sponsor, WorkProud. We are a perfect collaboration. Everybody wants to know they matter and that the work they do is meaningful and appreciated. WorkProud helps companies to do just that through their mobile platform that is built to encourage employees to share stories and recognize each other's contribution. WorkProud empowers HR and business leaders to help create company cultures where all employees are inspired to feel proud of their work and proud of their company. Learn more about WorkProud and the recent study they've commissioned about pride in the work at workproud.com. You can actually then click on the button there to actually get your copy of the paper. With us today is Deborah Westphal, who is an executive advisor, futurist, and author of Convergence, Technology, Business, and the Human-Centric Future. Her career spans more than 30 years in virtually every continent. A passionate humanist and lifelong learner, she has guided government and corporate leaders to challenge biases, ignite ideas, and build resilience for a secure future. We'll be talking today about the state of today's business and the need for and benefits of moving to a human-centric future. She joins us today from Salt Lake City. Deborah, welcome to Working on Purpose.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here, Elise.
I'm glad. And, as I said, I love getting to be the host. And, I read your book cover to cover. It's a gorgeous book. Well, extremely well written, too. It's very clear to me, my dear, that you are wicked smart and passionate. I like that combination.
Thank you. I appreciate the compliment and I really appreciate you reading the book. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome. I always like to say when somebody says they listen to my show, I always say, so you're the one. It's kind of like that with the book too, right? So one of the things that immediately caught my eye when I was reading your book is you say in some ways it's 30 years in the making. So if that's so, then Deborah, why now? Why this book now?
Well, the 30 years was my journey, and my journey from, being an engineer and young MBA student, thinking that, systems and structure and organizational design was key to a successful business, to really understanding that it's humans that are the key to success. And so that was the 30 years. Why now? We are in the middle, we're just stepping into the information age. It's very new, and a lot of our assumptions about how things work, how business work, are probably outdated, and we just really don't realize that. And so it is a key time to start really thinking about this in a very different way. And this is business, it's relationship with people, and what are we going to do with all this advanced technology we're developing?
Mm-hmm. I have been saying since the beginning of the pandemic, this was a perfect time to really look at and evaluate all of your systems, especially any system that touches a human being in your organization, to see which ones, which be many of them, need to be thrown out entirely or reinvented. And I can't wait till we talk about your idea of obsolescence later on. So important. So before we get to that, though, I want to just start with the premise of the way you created this book. I think it's so clever what you did. And I love clever analogies that elucidate ideas. And so I'd love to hear how you came up with the idea of your three-part analogy of the book between the Galapagos ocean currents and technology, business, and people.
Sure. It was on a trip actually to the
I
Galapagos,
figured,
and
of course.
and if you've ever been there, it's an amazing place. It's a set of some 70 different islands that are volcanoes or making new islands almost every day, and each island is very unique. Some are big, some are small. But what is key to the Galapagos Island is this really interesting, convergence of ocean currents that are coming from the north and the west and from the south that bring nutrients and perfect weather and just that combination to let the animals and the plant life and everything thrive. And it was on a trip about 18 months ago that it was like, you know what, this is like business. This is the business environment. There are these currents that are happening that when they're in perfect balance, it creates an environment for businesses to thrive and be successful and be created. If the currents become out of balance, just like in the islands, it will put in danger the life forms that live there. And that is the same with business. If we allow business or the purpose of business or technology to kind of create an imbalance with what we're doing for people, then it will put in harm our business too.
Mm-hmm. Beautifully said. And I just thought that was so clever how you came up with that analogy, especially with the name of your book, Convergence. Okay, so next then, let's contrast what you talk about as the old universal business laws and what you see as needed in today's business world.
Modern business, the business that we know today it's taken us, 60, 70 years to create. We've gone through globalization and industrialization and, all the things that we've learned over those 70, 80 years have, been fine-tuned for efficiency and effectiveness for a very different day, a very industrial globalization, mass production perspective. Those laws, if you would, those things that we know and have learned and have experienced over those past decades, or passed down from generation to generation on how to run business, are no longer, in some cases, relevant for an information age. We are globalized. We are highly connected. We have this advanced technology, and to fine-tune efficiency and effectiveness for business, there's something greater here that we need to step back and look at, and that's that's where I made that statement about it's time to do that. It's time to realize where we're at.
Mm-hmm. Well, and within that, you talk specifically about the human energy variable, which is very interesting for me, Deb, because my whole world between meaning and purpose is all about activating and elevating that energy from individuals inside organizations. So say more about this human energy variable piece.
Technology has allowed us to connect to almost everybody on the planet, and soon we will be able to connect with all the infrastructure and communication infrastructure that's being put in the world. And what it's done is it's allowed people to connect to like people, to have discussions and share dreams and hopes and fears, and so this power shift, if you would, to people and the voices and their desires have created this human energy, has unleashed it. I mean, we've always had that inside of us, but it's unleashed it in a way that it is more of a human system that needs to be paid attention to. And it's inside our organizations, it's outside of our organizations, and it's a very powerful thing when we really stand back and look at what's inside an individual and what they would like to achieve. Just unleash that for your business, and that will ignite the business.
You're singing my song, Deb. You're totally singing my song. I'm right there with you. Oh, as we were sort of talking about before we got on air together, when I was reading your book, I just kept going, gosh, this is so sounds to me like stakeholder capitalism, conscious capitalism. How would you distinguish how your human-centric approach to business and leadership is different or distinguished from those two?
It's not different, it's additive. And,
Okay.
under that definition of kind of stakeholder capitalism, it's look at your employees, pay attention to your employees or your suppliers or your customers, and then the communities that you operate in. Where I expanded is humanity, because we are in this time of hyperconnectedness that, even if you operate in a very regional or localized community, your impact is probably regional or global. And then we have companies that are already global, that are in thousands of communities, that, you almost have to redefine community to be humanity. And what do I mean by that? You can take environmental impact as a problem of humanity or an opportunity that businesses need to pay attention to. So it's an additive, it's not distinguished, and it's trying to expand that definition.
Mm-hmm. You know what I saw in it, Deborah, and it's kind of what you were just saying before, is I feel like what you're doing is, it's not different. It's an expansion, but it's also like a honing in on that human energy piece, right? So you're really seems like you're intent on activating, the promise of each individual, which I am too. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, I think so. And so many times when people use stakeholder inside a business, they define it as customer, and then they segment customer, and it's really the people that buy their products. It's not those other people that maybe you're impacting with some business process that you're doing, or long-term impact on because of how you manage your water, or how you're polluting the world, or how you're looking at diversity or and inclusion as a whole problem, not just inside your organization. So stakeholder to me has almost been hijacked as a word, because it's really about customer, and that hones in very, very narrowly, that I don't think represents what advocates like yourself are trying to do, which is we need to look at a broader sense of people and what we're doing and the impact.
Hmm. And to that end, as you know, I'm on the board of the Dallas Conscious Capitalism Group, and on September 24th, I'll be facilitating for a group, basically a stakeholder mapping exercise, where we are actually digging into each of those respective communities: the customers, the suppliers, the community, the employees, the investors, right? So really trying to really understand deeply their needs, their interests, how they're connected, what's in it for them to be part of, your ship, if you will, or be on your ship. So I completely agree with you that term has been it's really been overutilized, and therefore it's not as valuable as it used to be.
There's so many kind of hidden stakeholders that we don't recognize, or we don't analyze, because it's a new thing. I mean, an example I like to use is, there's a thought that says, well, if we put everything on the internet and we do everything virtually, this will be great. We won't have to travel. We won't have to get in our cars. We can bring down the carbon emissions. But in honesty, all honesty, the internet is, if it was a country, it's the sixth most populating country in the world.
Well,
More internet, more data means more data centers. More data centers mean more energy. And so if we continue on the way we're doing with just, that virtual and data and such, the internet, that those global data centers, will be the 14th largest carbon emission in the world by 2034. And we don't think about that. We don't think about that as a stakeholder. And that's kind of the call to action here, is we need a new set of tools and mental models for thinking about who is our stakeholder.
mm-hmm. Very insightful. I love that, Deb. That's very insightful. So what I want to do next is I want to read a short little passage here that I think will be music to not just the ears of mine as I read it, but also to our listeners, and then have you comment on it. It's beautiful. You say, let me start where I got this right. So the piece in your book that has got to be used. Okay, so you say the reality is, with technology becoming more and more ubiquitous, people are becoming more important, not less. Only humans can bring the energy, the emotional electricity that transforms companies, governments, and societies into forces capable of accomplishing extraordinary things. Amen. Ah, that's gorgeous.
Thank you. Yeah, that's right. Because we feel, we have compassion, we have empathy, we have goals, we have families that we want a better future for. And technology, there's probably a whole larger conversation about algorithms and kind of what they are and what they're not, and the dangers and the opportunities. But technology is not a panacea. It's not going to solve everything. If you take the heart and soul out of what we're doing, and that's really what people are inside your organizations as well as outside your organizations.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful, Deb. And on that, let's take our first break. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We are on the air with Deborah Westphal, who is the author of Convergence, Technology, Business, and the Human-Centric Future. We've been talking a bit about why she wrote the book and what's going on in today's world. After the break, we're going to get into the state of today's business that so requires the work that she's doing today. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. Before we get into the program, I'd like to invite you to check out my book, Purpose Ignited, How Inspiring Leaders Ignite Passion and Elevate Cause, which is on Amazon now. I wrote that book to awaken readers to their passion and purpose and help transform them into inspirational leaders who enliven the workplace and elevate the contribution of business to all its stakeholders. I use this content as a basis for my inspirational leadership and Grab Your Gusto programs. If you're just joining the program, my guest today is Deborah Westphal, who is an executive advisor, futurist, and author of Convergence, Technology, Business, and the Human-Centric Future. She joins us today from Salt Lake City. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. So, Deb, before we get into the state of business, I want to go back real quick and cover that one last piece around technology that I wanted to get before the break, because it's so beautifully written, and I think you are so uniquely capable of rendering this the way that you did. So you wrote in your book, we think about technology as applications, interfaces, and most often gadgets. That perception, while accurate, is profoundly limiting. Technology is perhaps the most concrete manifestation of human consciousness, evolving since the first stone chopping tool emerged nearly 2 million years ago. Categorically, it encompasses the entirety of the human-made artifacts that have facilitated and in some cases represented human evolution. That's gorgeous.
Thank you. It is it's a symbiotic relationship. It's there's things that we need to do, that we want to do, that we desire for a better future, a better life, and we develop technology to do that. And then by using that technology, we learn, we unlearn, and relearn. And it is something that is human driven. It's not something to be feared. But I think that's kind of where we're at right now, is we're relearning. And that's why the human part of this, the people side, takes precedence. And it always takes precedence.
Hmm. I really felt that it gave access, and I think it repositions or reframes technology in a way that people can celebrate, and as you say, not be afraid of. And I really wanted to showcase that. I just thought it was gorgeous. So
Yes, thank you.
you're welcome. And before we get further into the state of the business stuff, I have to ask you about your travels. I love to travel too, and you talk in your book about your treks to Antarctica, trekking Kilimanjaro. You've been to Bhutan, which was on my list until I was going to run a race in Bhutan last year, but we know what happened. So I'm interested to know how those experiences have contributed to how you see the world or business.
The travel is probably you do too. You go to all these places, you go to the museums and you eat their food. But what is to me the most amazing is the people and their
Hmm.
culture
No doubt.
and having those conversations. And when you have those conversations with people in those countries, I think you realize that we're more the same than we're different. And to me, that to me is the most exciting part about traveling is knowing that the same things that I want for my family and goals, they are too. They're different experiences, but we're very much the same.
Hmm. You're reminding me, Deb. I spoke at a conference in Malaysia in August of 2018, I think it was, or 17. I can't remember which one. But what was so amazing about that is I told you before we got on the air that I love languages and I speak 5 different languages. And when I was in Malaysia, I used all of them, and which is Spanish, Portuguese, French, and Italian, and of course English. And what was so great is here I am in this beautiful country, and I'm meeting all these other people who I can talk with because that's my leverage point. That's my segue, if you will. And the connection is so powerful and so profound. Anyway, so I love for me, travel it teaches me so much about life. So
And
I mean,
myself, and myself.
and myself.
I've learned so much about myself traveling that I think is very important.
Me too. Me too. You said something in the book that well, it did a lot of things in the book that I didn't know, but this one here that was really striking to me, and I want to say that few people probably know this or recall this either, and that is that you say business was more benevolent until the 1980s when it began to move away from civic belief and move more towards serving the shareholder, which of course we all know today is very prominent. So what caused the shift towards shareholder primacy?
It was probably the raising voices, but there was a gentleman, Milton Friedman, who was very economist, and he was
Yes.
very influential. And again, it was in the time that we were industrializing and we were globalizing, and then you have this economist come in and say, you know what, the sole purpose for business is to maximize shareholder profit, and that is the only reason for business. And so focus your attention, focus your energy, focus your organization structure on doing that, and you'll be successful. In some cases, he was right for the time, but now, that is what is different about today is we are globalized, and so that's what I meant by in the book. And the challenge for people now is to realize how we got here and to challenge whether or not those same things are good going forward.
Well, that's why, of course, as we talked about, I'm very much a champion for conscious capitalism, stakeholder capitalism, and doing business that betters the world. It's a bigger reach when you say I want to help the world. I want to help people rather than just make money, right? To me, that's really kind of hollow. Money is great. It's so important. And we can do a lot of things with money, but when it's powered by passion and purpose, it's just such a better end.
It's interesting because I've been asked if I'm anti-business and if I'm anti-capitalism, and quite the opposite. I'm very pro-business. Business
Absolutely.
has so much power. They have, so much innovation and capability within their people and experiences and technology that they can spin that to do something broader. And it's been proven in a lot of cases that if you take this broader perspective, you're actually going to be a better, stronger, more successful business.
Oh yeah, I've in my literature I find over and over that investors are looking for purpose-driven businesses to invest in because they return a better return on investment. So, yeah, so I'm sure we could find examples of companies that maybe aren't performing as well when they're purpose-driven. But boy, when you're operating well and focused on how to serve more people better, really works pretty well. So
yeah, it's hard to motivate your workforce if all it is about let's make more money. The motivation comes with something that touches the heart,
yeah.
and that's what that purpose driven means.
Yeah, yeah. And so, to that end, one of the other things that I found really profoundly interesting about your book that I did not know about, of course, I know about the quarter driven system of Wall Street, which I do take issue with. But so, what you taught me in your book, though, that I didn't know about was I was thrilled to learn about Eric Ries, who launched in 2015 the long term stock exchange, which, of course, is the first national securities exchange promoting a long term focus on for investors and companies. So that's fascinating. I did go and look it up, by the way, since you brought that up. But tell us more about this.
It's hard to take this longer view at some of the problems that need to be addressed if you're having to maximize for the week or the month or the quarter. Your
Right.
whole decision making process is very different. And so by taking a long view and having being more patient, if you would, you can take on other opportunities. You can take on more these opportunities to solve bigger problems for people. And so having that kind of support from investors, which we there's others too that the whole business roundtable
Mhm.
and BlackRock CEO saying, "Hey, we need to start focusing on the long term." Having that future focus and that longer term will allow a very different decision making process.
Yeah, and listeners and viewers, if you don't know what Deborah's talking about, and she talked about it in her book, I talked about it in my book as well, that in August of, was it 19, that the 181 CEOs signed the
Mhm.
Business Roundtable statement saying that we're moving away, that the purpose of an organization is to serve all stakeholders, not just shareholders. Essentially, that was what the statement said. Do I have that right?
Yes, it did. And now the trick is how do we do that? Because
Mm-hmm.
again, our businesses today have been structured around a very different kind of purpose, which is maximizing shareholder profit and being very efficient and effective in doing that. Now the challenge for those leaders are, okay, how are we going to do that? And we're seeing progress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And also, I wanted to call out since you had introduced me to this long term stock exchange, I went and did some digging on Eric Ries. I found a video and I also found some news. And I did notice that he's listed two companies now, a software company called Twilio and Asana as of just this year. So I don't know if you know anything about either of those, but I thought that was fantastic to hear.
Yeah, and I it's new, and we'll see what they do for the long term. But I think it's just very exciting that we have support and financial support to be taking this longer view.
Hmm. Hmm. Me too. I think it's incredibly encouraging and definitely a good direction to pursue and flesh out. So okay, so the next thing I want to treat here with this is your new term that I believe you have created, obsolescence. Thank you for that, by the way. It's just yummy. But I found it delightful and also profound. And it seems that what you're stepping into the notion that we're learning so much faster these days with human knowledge doubling. You say every 13 months, but we fail to consider which of those additional knowledge inputs acquired over time should be kept and utilized. That is quite interesting. And you, as a woman who started off in engineering and know quite a lot about data, that really strikes me as pretty profound for us to talk about. So, tell us more about this obsolescence and what we can do about it.
Yeah, and obsolescence, it's obsolete knowledge, right?
Right.
It's, we're creating knowledge at the speed of heat right now. And sometimes it's useful knowledge, sometimes it's not so useful, but we never stop and consider, well, what do we what's obsolete now? An easy one for me to think about, because I am that old, is when I went through high school, there were 9 planets. We don't have 9 planets anymore more in our solar system. We have 8, and we have a mini planet. Pluto became a mini planet. And so, if you don't stop and think about what we know and whether or not it's relevant anymore, if we learn new things, then it's almost like this garbage dump, or a messy garage that has all this stuff in it that makes it very, very hard to manage in a efficient way. And so obsolete knowledge also includes our obsolete beliefs and biases
Mhm.
about how things work and how the world works.
Hmm. Well, and I can remember, to your point, Deb, I think I can remember, I believed I learned, and you and I are probably similar in age. I believe I learned that only men could be colorblind. My daughter is colorblind, right? I'm pretty
Right,
sure I learned that in school. And we no longer know that to be true, right? So that's an example of having to weed out and get rid of obsolete knowledge that is no longer correct or serves. I remember very clearly we were driving to school and I said, "Oh, that's interesting. Why would they make that flashing light like police cars?" She's like, "What are you talking about? That's pink." I'm like,
right,
"What are you talking about?" So,
right,
and she'd been trying to tell me that she was colorblind, but I told her emphatically she can't be because she's not male. So there's a perfect
right.
example, right?
And these things get in our way, right? They get in our way about how, I mean, how many times do we hear that in our organizations today? That will never work. We
Right.
tried that.
Yes.
We tried that 20 years ago. That will never work. It doesn't
Yes.
work that way, right? And
Right.
these things are just, they're obsolete and they're no longer useful to us to have these beliefs.
Yeah, they're limiting and it could be actually devastating to your livelihood and success. So
Absolutely.
why I wanted to talk about that, Deb. So thank you. So on that note, let's grab our last break. I'm Elise Cortez, your host. We've been on the air with Deborah Westphal, who is the author of Convergence, Technology, Business, and the Human-Centric Future. We've been talking about the state of business today. After the break, we're going to get into moving to human-centric leadership. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. One other bit of news that I have to share with you is that the anthology I've been curating for the last 2 years is about to be released in just a matter of days. It's a collection of 25 stories of women from around the world who share their intimate stories and all the messy details that come with discovering their purpose and how they're serving from it today. So I'm so proud of us. I could just bust. And so the anthology is called Passionately Striving and Why, an anthology of women who persevere mightily to live their purpose, and it's on Amazon now. So thank you for your support in advance for reading it. If you're just joining us, my guest is Deborah Westphal, who is an executive advisor, futurist, and author of Convergence, Technology, Business, and the Human-Centric Future. She joins us today from Salt Lake City. I'm your host, Elise Cortez. So now we want to get into this whole idea of human-centric leadership. And as we do, I thought it was so delightful that when I read your definition, I realized that your definition of leadership aligns quite nicely with mine in the inspirational camp. So you say leadership is the fundamental ability to behave with humility and wisdom, to engage authentically, and to inspire others toward achieving a purpose they might never accomplish on their own. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'm excited to hear that you think the same thing, and
Mhm.
I think in a lot of cases, that's not shared, unfortunately. I think it's still kind of an old mental model of what leadership is, that they're at the top, they should know all the answers, they make all the decisions, and I don't know how leaders can do that in a world that's become very, very complex. You need everybody's, all hands on deck on this. And so open that aperture and really take, instead of being at the top of a pyramid, being at the bottom and helping others achieve their greatness and support the organization.
Well, and beyond all that, right, Deb, what will become in doing so is two things: irresistible and impactful.
Yeah. And bringing our authentic self also gives hope and courage, I think, to others to really, that may not in other situations may not bring all that. And I think that to me, it's so interesting to be where I'm at in my career, and because I do have people that reach back after decades and say, boy, remember when, and this was 20 years ago,
Yeah.
and they thought enough of me to tell me that I made an impact in their life and in their career. And I think that's very fulfilling.
It is. And, as you've heard me say before, everybody wants to matter, right? And as a leader, we really get to matter to people's lives. And so if you get to be the person that helps someone literally step into and reach into their shine, how amazing is that, right? So
Right.
that's my call to action for anybody listening in right now. That's what I would ask of you. Just think about what you can do to have people step into their shine with your leadership. So to that, and also I've never heard anybody quite treat situational leadership the way that you did in your book, which I also want to call out. It's really quite stunning. It's very specific and it's very profound. And so you showcase situational leadership as derived from Dr. Paul Hershey and Dr. Ken Blanchard, who, as you say, introduced the situational leadership theory, which suggested that leaders choose a leadership style based on the developmental maturity of their team members. I've never seen that distinguished like that, based on the developmental maturity of their team members. That's pretty amazing, pretty profound.
Well, that's I think that is their giving of themselves to be a better leader, and when they give of themselves through humility or authenticity, and really grow with the team back and forth. I think that is that is kind of the goal, I think. And to do that, you got to listen and get out of the way and think about not the pyramid of an organization, but more of an organization like a layer of pancakes, and accomplishing things. And so I think leadership is changing, and we need a different model of leadership.
So one of the things I did want to ask you, which I think you're just starting to speak to there, is how can leaders learn the maturity of their team members in order to serve them through their situational leadership?
Yeah, ask, listen, interface, tell stories, listen to stories, and really make it not just about the business, but make it about the human. And you can do that within the business, for sure. But it's, I think we've separated the leader from the rest of the organization. We've put them in an office and it's on a different floor, and maybe that floor is locked, and that's not where the leader should be. They should be with their people and listening to their ideas and what's working, what's not working.
Two things come immediately to mind. Emotional intelligence and back to your storytelling, right? So what I'm seeing consistently over and over again in the work that I'm doing and who I'm having on the show is the importance, the criticality of developing that emotional intelligence, of really being able to understand with empathy your team, what they need, what they want, what they ache for, and then to be able to hear it, right? And make the place safe so they can actually voice their concerns and what they want. And then, of course, the storytelling piece for me speaks to being able to share, both what did Deb do amazing today with the rest of the team, that story, but also what is this organization doing that's actually really making a difference in the world? And guess what? You're part of that.
Yeah, and a hefty dose of self-awareness too, because if you don't know what your biases are, you don't really understand your core values, and it takes time to understand your core values as an individual. If you don't understand how you make decisions, or why you make decisions, or what your triggers are, it's going to be less effective. I think those other things are going to be less effective because it's more coming from a place of a to do rather than to be. And you have to know what you are to bring that be part to the conversation.
I think that was the price of admission, worth the price of admission right there, Deb. Self-awareness is so important. And I would say, truthfully, so much of the work that I end up doing when people say that they need leadership development is what they're dealing with is people that aren't self-aware. They don't know what they don't know, and they have no idea that the impact, the shrapnel that they're causing. Had a great guy in my show named Tim Spiker on my show, and he wrote a book called Are You a Leader Worth Following? And essentially what he's talking about is what happens when we work for leaders who aren't self-aware, who don't understand who they are in the world and haven't done their self-work, and that shrapnel that they throw out to their people then comes home with each individual as they then tell their significant other about their awful day and their horrible boss, and they kick the dog and they yell at their children, and that, the ongoing effect just continues, the ripple. So your point about self-awareness, I think, is really critical.
Yeah, it's know yourself, and when you do that, you don't necessarily have to armor up with a persona that says you're a leader. You can be confident in not knowing an answer, or saying, you know what, this is a really hard problem. I don't know how to solve it, but together I have the confidence that we can all figure this out. And so I think that self-awareness is really important, and we don't teach that in business schools. We don't. And we don't necessarily coach on that from a leadership perspective necessarily. I had a boss a long time ago, and I messed up pretty big time. And I said, I need to tell my team I'm sorry. And he says, no, you never tell them you're sorry, because, as soon as you say you're sorry, then you show weakness. And, sometimes I think we teach some really bad characteristics and habits.
Well, and wouldn't you say that comes from obsolescence again? That's somebody, he got that off the
Absolutely.
shelf, from 1960s, 1970s or whatever, and he's been carrying that around with him ever since. He pulled it right out of his backpack to give to you, and I hope, it sounds to me like you maybe rejected that. I don't know what happened in that situation, but yeah, I've heard that a lot. Don't say you're sorry. Gosh, last thing.
Yeah, but that's a great example of that obsolete knowledge. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And going back to your idea of human-centric leadership, one of the things I also found quite interesting about your book is you say the stronger the focus on people companies had before COVID-19, the higher their chances of survival during and through the crisis. So you also went on to say, in a sense, value propositions shifted from what companies wanted to sell to providing what people valued most. And of course, this is the heart of human-centric behavior. Pretty interesting. And so if you'd say more about what you've noticed in this trend of in these companies that have actually been able to maybe not just get by, but even maybe thrive because of their focus on providing value and helping people.
Yeah, I think that it goes back to that purpose-driven. If it's to serve and to help, then you got through COVID a little bit easier. If it was to sell a product that wasn't necessarily needed at the time, and that was your sole purpose, to make money, you probably failed, or you probably struggled. I use the example of restaurants. I think it's a really great example. And, because we can all relate to it, because we all had to feed ourselves through this when everything started shutting down. But the restaurants, especially the local restaurants that really knew that this was about feeding people, making sure they got nutrition, sustaining life, they pivoted pretty fast. They figured, I can still cook, and we can figure out how to get that food to individuals. Those restaurants that really thought it was a destination or a cute place, or come to my place so I can entertain you, that mindset didn't survive through the shutdown. And so I think it's a really great example of how, some lessons learned. I mean, that's not taken away from the tragedy of COVID and how stressful it was for all of us. But I do think there is an immense amount of lessons learned from a business that I hope we learn, and not try to go back to what we were in a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm. Deb, that's how I got the idea to offer the Grab Your Gusto offering, because as I was sitting through the pandemic, and of course, a lot of the work that I was doing was speaking and developing inspirational leaders and doing culture consulting, which I still do today. What I kept hearing over and over again was the concern that business leaders had for the mental health and well-being of their people. And I realized, gosh, I can help with that because I'm a local therapist, and the work that I do really speaks to how to help teach people how to activate, their own energy systems through meaning and purpose from the inside out. That's a great way to combat, some of the issues that we're dealing with. And that's how I created that product. It was by listening to that. And I would have never thought about doing that before. That wasn't a natural immediate response to how I was doing my work.
Yeah, that's a great example, and I think it really tapped into that human system, because that need is that need will continue whether or not we go back to work or in a workplace or not.
Yeah, and I know that, right? So this gets to, the combination of positive psychology, existential psychology. These are my jams, right? This is what I know, and I know this is what creates optimal mental health and energy and vitality. So anyway, that actually all happened, thank you, because of the pandemic. So not saying that I'm grateful for the pandemic. I'm just saying
Right.
that's a nice side benefit. Let me be clear. So we're getting close to the end here, and I definitely want to get you to talk about, you've got a 6-point framework for consideration that starts with the realization that immense energy exists within the human system. So would you say a little something about this 6-point framework? It'll help us understand just the breadth and depth of your work.
Right. So if we think about starting with that human system, and maybe it's my engineering background that really looks at that as a system, humanity as a system, it's a power source, and it can be tapped into. Tap into that energy, tap into that desire, those hearts, that innovation. That would be the first thing, is to just recognize it and figure out a way how to tap into it. The second point is, realize that your organization was built for a very different time and for a very different purpose. And, we benchmark off of each other, and we all went to the same MBA classes. And so there's a common belief about how business is structured, and how it should be organized and run. And so realize that is for the past. That was the industrial age. It's not for the knowledge age. Resist the strong momentum to just keep retaining the status quo. That would be the third point, is check yourself moment by moment, and the decisions that you're making, are you making them based on past belief and past practices, or are you really creating for the future and the future organization? And that's going to take you to have to disrupt your beliefs. And we've talked about this obsolete and the behaviors that, when you're on autopilot and you're running real fast in the organization, it is really hard to be disruptive. Embrace humanity and really that authenticity, and be transparent and build trust. And as a leader, that is really the call to action. It's no longer a choice as to whether or not you really pivot to a human-centric perspective, but how you pivot to that. And I think that is the call to action for the future success of business.
Beautiful, Deb. Absolutely gorgeous. We're really close out of time, but I want to give you like 15 seconds if you want to go ahead and close out and leave our listeners with anything you'd like them to know.
Humanity is changing business, and we need to realize that. And it's the issues, it's the challenges, it's the desires, and it is impacting our business. And we need to be aware of that, and stand in that place and reassess our leadership and our organizations.
Beautiful way to finish, Deb. Thank you so much for being a guest on my show, for creating and putting out this gorgeous book, important book. I'm really glad to know you. Thanks for being on the show.
You too. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Listeners and viewers, if you want to learn more about Deborah Westphal, her work, her book, or her life and adventures, start by visiting her website. It's Deborah Westphal. Let me spell that for you. Deborah, Deborah, Westphal, Westphal, DeborahWestphal.com. And thanks again to our partner and sponsor, WorkProud, which helps companies build a platform where your workforce receives meaningful feedback, and thanks for the work from people across your company. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast. We were on the air with Natalie Benamou talking about the platform for women she launched in the pandemic called Her C-Suite. Next week, we'll be on air with Daniel Sanderson, the creator of Planksip, a new approach to publishing that helps emerging thought leaders with personal branding by co-creating organic content. See you there. Remember, that work's at least a third of our life, so let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires and passion performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.